very welcome to all of our plumbers out there and those of you who are different industries for joining us for this Toolbox Talk on a Tuesday morning. We really have had this become part of our everyday week, getting to work and making sure that our Toolbox Talks are done, whether you're doing it personally yourself, whether you're tying into these live Toolbox Talks, whether you're watching them on the recordings, or even if you are trying to use this as an additional method for occupational health and safety training. It really is appreciated from our side that you have reached out and also continue to talk to us about what you want to hear in these Toolbox Talks. But as always, we do need to continually prevent COVID-19. In fact, we need to continually prevent any occupational disease. Now, the following protocols to continually preventing COVID-19 can also help us with other hygiene-related issues. Washing our hands with soap and water, if that's not available, using an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, making sure that if we have not washed our hands yet, that we avoid touching our eyes, nose, and mouth, adhering to social distancing with people who are sick, and then covering your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or tissue, as well as cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched objects and surfaces, which would include the use of our hand tools, power tools, or any equipment that might be handheld to the degree that we haven't washed our hands yet and perhaps can cross-contaminate these items. So if you are sharing items, we do encourage you to do this more regularly, as it says frequently touched objects. If this is the case, any handles and things like that obviously are frequently touched throughout the day. Then if you can, do your part and get vaccinated. Again, this is everybody's choice. And we also encourage you to ensure that your company has a policy based on COVID-19, as well as including a COVID-19 vaccination program. So this morning's Toolbox Talk, as we mentioned the week before, because last week we did have a public holiday, and we hope you enjoyed that and had a great week. But before that, we wanted to look at all the risks that we are faced with as plumbers. And today we want to chat about heights, because heights is something that a plumber is always going to come across, whether it's on a ladder, working on a scaffold, having to climb into a ceiling or a confined space that is at heights, perhaps even climbing onto a roof to go and do an inspection. One of the other things that plumbers, and maybe not all plumbers, are exposed to is a mobile elevated working platform, that is working from a cherry pick or a scissors lift. And that's really what we're going to be discussing today, looking at the various regulations and then giving you some sort of safe working procedure while you are working on these. Please note that this Toolbox Talk is not going to replace what you should already have. So when we are discussing things, we might miss something because we've only got 25 minutes to discuss working at heights, which is really not enough time at all. We can spend 25 minutes just on one area, such as ladders, and on one section of ladders, such as A-frame ladders. When it comes to all the working areas, we encourage you to ensure you still have your own risk assessments, safe working procedures, fall protection plans, competency training, etc. But let's take a look at the working at heights. And the next week, we'll take a look at any electrical work that is done by plumbers who are plumbers and electrical. But at the same time, if you are not an electrician, but you rely on an electrician as a contractor or perhaps working on a construction site, where as a plumber you need to work close hand in hand with electricians, we're also going to look at some of the dangers there and what you can do to mitigate that for yourself as a plumber. And then lastly, at the end of the month, we're going to be looking at water and why is water such a danger when it comes to the work that you are actually doing. The safety thought for this week is a fall, a slip, a hospital trip. We do not want that to happen. So we want to try and eliminate at all possibilities any falls or slips that occur on our sites. So starting off with, what is heights? Working at a height means to work in any place where if precautions were not taken, a person could fall a distance liable to cause personal injury. Now, one of the questions that was raised by a few plumbers when discussing the content of our Toolbox Talks, in particular working at heights, was what is the height? Is it 1.2 meters? Is it 1.8 meters? Because everybody's being told something different. Now, we must understand that the law does not give us a specific height. There's no meterage or distance that we start saying, well, this is now starting to work at heights. It is all dependent on the risk assessment, and it's all based off of this meaning. If precautions were not taken, a person could fall a distance, now that is any distance, liable to cause personal injury. Now, you might say, well, let's go to the extreme, Chris. You could step up onto one step of a staircase and fall and cause personal injury. And you would be right, 100% right in saying that. Is that essentially working at heights, using something as an access point? Well, it all depends. What type of work is being performed? Where is this access point? What is the area around the access point? What is that access point being used for? And also, is it a temporary structure that it's being used? Or is it a proper solid structure like a staircase in a building? In that case, then the risk assessment will determine whether that distance, which is liable to cause personal injury, is regarded as working at heights. Now, we're also not saying that the opposite is true. If you're working at 2 meters and the risk assessment says that you cannot be hurt from a fall of 2 meters, then it's not working at heights. Well, then whoever did that risk assessment is incorrect, you see, because obviously the higher you go, the more risk there is of personal injury. Even if you have fall protection, fall prevention, fall arrest in place, then there are other mitigating factors that have stopped you from the fall, but then there are also other risks involved, such as the pendulum effect. Where is the anchorage point in adjacent to the actual person from where they are working? Is that person going to fall and then swing toward where their anchor point is and perhaps collide with something that is in the way? You also have things like suspension trauma. Just wearing a full body harness and being arrested in it for too long a period can cause irreparable damage to the human body. So yes, working at heights is anywhere where a person could fall. And this could be working above ground, above floor level, working from an edge through an opening, a fragile surface, falling from ground level into an opening, such as in an excavation or trench, would also be considered a working at heights area. The degree of risk, again, would come down to your risk assessment. But now on some construction sites, they would then give a definite meterage. They would say 100% when you start at 1.2 meters up, any 1.2 meter work, especially on temporary platforms, is considered working at heights. Some of our clients, particularly in the banking area, like Absa Bank, FNB, Standard Bank, they say that 1.8 meters is their judgment for working at heights, unless it is within the construction work. So if you're doing maintenance work, perhaps refitting light bulbs, maybe changing sprinkler heads and things like that, they say it's not construction work, so you don't adhere to the 1.2. We will then adhere to the 1.8, which is basically the size of a ladder. A normal A-frame ladder is about 1.8 meters, but you never stand on top of that ladder or the last 2 steps of that ladder, which means your feet never reach a height of 1.8 meters. And that is also something that we must remember. The 1.2 meterage on a construction site is when your foot level, so the base of your feet, has gone past 1.2 meters, not when the work is over 1.2 meters. So that is something also to consider, because that is what we call the fall distance. The distance from the person's feet where they are standing to the distance where they will impact the ground. That is the fall distance. And really on construction sites, that is 1.2 meters. Now, again, that's not every construction site. It's just the ones that we have been working on. And there they have given their safety specification with regard to that. Now, if you've found something different, we also encourage you to please reach out to us and tell us what you are finding out there. And let us see if we can't come to some sort of agreement within the plumbing industry to say, regardless of what the height is, what precautions can we actually put in place? But now, working on a roof obviously is going to be a lot higher than 1.2 meters. And so we will always go to what we call the best regulation for the job. It's like using the best tool for the job. Obviously, we want to use the right tool so that we can get the job done correctly. Now, when looking at the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it doesn't tell us about roof work. And so when working on a roof, we have to look for the correct regulations or the correct legislation in order to guide us in the safety manner, because the OSH Act tells us that we need to ensure risk assessment is done and ensure our staff are safe. Now, how can we do this by, sucking our thumb and thinking, what must I do to keep us safe? Let's just go to the best regulations. Even though you're not doing construction regulation, the fall protection regulation 10 of the construction regulations can help us. Number one, it says ensuring that you have a competent person in the preparation of a fall protection plan. Now, it's all dependent on the roof work that you are performing, but generally speaking, all roof work will fall part of construction regulation 10.5, and we'll get to that in the next slide. But in addition to construction regulation 10.5, we will look at 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4. And that is because fall protection in its theoretical ideal of protecting somebody from a fall is essentially what you are trying to achieve when working on a roof. So the second thing is a risk assessment that must be carried out from a full risk position. And then obviously from that, procedures and methods must be used to address the risks identified. Now, on all roof work, because it is a dangerous working at heights area, the process for the evaluation of the employee's medical fitness necessary to work at a full risk position, as well as the records. And this must include, and please remember this, because it does fall within construction regulations, your Annexure 2 of your construction regulation says any work that is worked where there is a danger of falling from heights. So essentially, working on a roof would then fall within construction regulations. The work you are doing might not be construction though. You have to have an Annexure 3 medical. So please remember this. Take it down, make a note of it. When you are going for your medicals, don't just go for a normal medical. You must get one that includes an Annexure 3. And that comes from the Annexure 3 of the construction regulations, where it specifically requires the person that is performing the actual medical for your employees to request information on working at heights, confined spaces, and any other hazardous work that they might find as a plumber. Then also a program for training of employees working from a full risk position. Now, this is something very interesting. Remember, it is a program for training employees, not just once off sending them for working at heights training. And now that they've got a certificate, they are competent. Please remember, a program is a series of training, whether it is formal training, like sending them out to go and get working at heights training, as well as informal on-the-job training. A lot of training companies do not know the work you specifically do or how you specifically do that. Please train your employees, and employees ask for that training on how to use a ladder properly, how to use and access a scaffold properly, especially if you're not the one setting it up. Now, perhaps you get given the scaffold by a subcontractor. You're not trained in the safe use of scaffolding. You should know and understand how that scaffolding works. You should also know how to protect yourself while working on that scaffold. And this can be done through toolbox talks, through safe working procedures, the risk assessment that is performed. That all forms part of the program for training. But we never want to just sign a document, which is often what we do. There's no time to read through it, no time to train. Just sign it so we can continue with work. Take the time. Remember, slipping, tripping, and falling could mean that you are sent to the hospital. Then also the procedure for inspecting, testing, and maintaining any fall protection equipment, from harnesses to anchorage points to any type of lifeline or work positioning system that you might be using. You need to know what is the procedure for addressing as well in inspecting and testing all of this fall protection equipment. Then lastly, you must have a rescue plan. How are you going to rescue someone who has fallen, either fallen off of something to a ground level, which shouldn't really happen because they should be hooked in. So essentially, what is the rescue plan of somebody falling, and then where have they ended up? Where is their fall position? Where have they finally ended up in the harness, from a lanyard or from a work positioning belt? How are you going to rescue that person and get them back to safety? As well as how are you going to safeguard the persons who are doing the rescuing? So as we mentioned, all roof work. Now it does say performed on a construction site, but actually this is any site, because Annexure 2 states that if there's a risk of falling from heights, it does work under the banner of construction. So in addition to these requirements, the roof work must be properly planned. And some of your clients will actually ask you for a roof work plan. How do you plan to do it? It's like a method statement, a health and safety plan. It's the methodology and the procedure that you're going to use to work safely on the roof. And this will incorporate things like your fall protection plan as well. The roof erectors, if you are erecting the work, must be competent to carry this out. No employee is permitted to work on roof during inclement weather conditions. All covers to openings and fragile materials of sufficient strength to withstand those loads. If you are going to walk over it, place things down on it, please remember that you have to cover any opening because you don't want somebody falling through that. Suitable and sufficient platforms, coverings, or similar means of support must be provided so that the weight of any person passing across the work on any material is supported. For many of those working on roofs, you might have come across this, where you've got nice steel sheeting and then you've got this polycarb plastic sheeting. Very easy to fall through that and very dangerous. You are never allowed to walk over that. And so obviously we must put these platforms or coverings over it to protect ourselves if we are walking in that area. Then if you can potentially do this, please put up guardrails, barriers, toe boards, or other similar means of protection to prevent as far as possible the fall of any person, material, and equipment from working at that height, especially when you are working at the edge, because there is more likely the chances of something falling or a person falling when it's actually at the edge. Now, the second part or the second area of working at heights would be on scaffolding, and this falls within Construction Regulation 16. But you'll notice that Construction Regulation 16 doesn't give a lot of information because there are over 20 different types of scaffolding. So it's important that whatever type of scaffold you use, you know what is the scaffold, how are you supposed to use it, how are you supposed to check it, and how are you supposed to work on that scaffolding correctly. So Construction Regulation 16 gives not a loophole, but an added protection for any person working on scaffolding, because it says that a contractor or any person using access scaffolding shall ensure that that scaffolding complies with the safety standards incorporated into these regulations under Section 44 of the OSH Act. Now, under Section 44 of the OSH Act, it states that the Minister from the Department of Labor is at any time allowed to add in additional standards, regulations, in order to protect a person in a particular area. And in this case, the SANS 1885 standard, or the standard for erecting, dismantling, and using access scaffolding, falls within that category. It's been incorporated into this legislation. So a contractor must ensure that all all work that is performed on a scaffolding is carried out under the supervision of a competent person. So there's your first appointment. A scaffolding supervisor has a team of scaffolding erectors, the minimum of 4, according to SANS 1885, as well as the team leaders and inspectors also being appointed and competent for the use of scaffolding. All of this means that documentation must be in place in accordance with SANS 1885 and for the specific type of scaffolding that is being used. Now, if you are not erecting that scaffold yourself, perhaps you're getting a contractor to do this for you, please make sure that you have the correct documentation in place in your file to cover yourself, because you are going to be using that access scaffolding. The third area of working at heights is ladders. And we will always go to the General Safety Regulation 13A under ladders, because this says that all employers and employees that use a ladder must make sure that the actual ladder itself is constructed of sound and suitable material. So we don't want to use any ladders that are not SANS approved or not quality approved. You don't want to go and buy cheap ladders that perhaps haven't passed any South African tests and then use this on sites. In fact, some sites are even banning the use of certain ladders because they are not made out of properly suitable and sound material. Then the ladder itself, is it being maintained? So perhaps you do have a quality, expensive ladder, but are you ensuring that it is maintained? Because it must be fitted with non-skid devices at the bottom ends, as well as hooks or similar devices on the top end. Now, if it's not maintained in the correct manner, these things might start wearing off and might start damaging, might start falling out. And yes, the ladder is still in good condition, but the safety features on the ladder are starting to wear away. Please remember, it is your responsibility to ensure that it is kept in a good condition. Now, at the same time, when using ladders, you must ensure the stability of the ladder, or it is lashed or held or secured whilst being used to ensure the stability of the ladder under all conditions and at all times. This could even be using the buddy system, where somebody actually physically holds the ladder while somebody else is climbing on or working on that ladder. But no person is allowed to use a ladder unless it is in a safe to use condition. This means you must look at the rungs. You need to take a look at the stiles, and that you haven't got any nails or screws or sparks or anything like that that is trying to keep this ladder together. It must be in a safe working condition as it came basically from the manufacturer. Now, moving on with ladders, you are not allowed to permit the use of a ladder or use a ladder if it is leaning against any object and the ladder is longer than 9 meters. Then you need to start moving over to what we call a caged ladder, where it is then bolted and fastened onto the side of a building or a structure, and then it's also enclosed with a proper cage. Now, when work is done from any ladder, the employer, please remember, you are responsible to take special precautionary measures to prevent articles from falling off. This is the person, tools, or equipment, and then also provide suitable sheaths or receptacles in which hand tools shall be kept when not being used. Now, some clients will require you to even have a lanyard that is also connected to your hand tools, and then it is wrapped around your wrist. And that lanyard will then prevent you from opening your hand and dropping the tool to a lower level, even by accident, because the lanyard will then protect it. So you must do whatever is possible. Notice it does say special precautionary measures. This would be over and above any other measures you have already taken. The last area of working at heights would be our mobile elevated working platforms, or shortly called a MEWP. The definition of a MEWP, or a cradle, means a platform that is enclosed on all sides. As you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, almost looks like basically a scaffold frame that you've lifted up. It's enclosed on all sides, but it is only open at the top. And this is designed for the purpose of raising or lowering persons by means of a lifting machine. So the lifting machine is the actual physical crane, if you could call it that, that is lifting the actual cradle. So this could be things like a cherry picker, a scissors lift, or even man cages on some tower cranes. Please note that you should actually wear a safety harness in a mobile elevated working platform. As you can see in this picture, the person is working in a safe platform, but is not hooked up to that cherry picker. And why is that? Why would this be an exception? Well, again, it would be determined on your risk assessment. Within the construction industry, in fact, even amongst ourselves as health and safety professionals, we have said that a safety harness should be worn at all times when working in a mobile elevated working platform, because it is the safest method for using these items. So please remember, you might come across that. It's not legislated, but it could be industry standard. And because it is protecting the lives of people who may have fallen or may have fallen in the past, and we want to prevent this, new legislation or new industry standards might be incorporated also into certain safety specifications. Please always adhere to the safe working load. You'll notice that the definition of a cradle is the purpose of raising and lowering persons. Now, oftentimes we see the raising and lowering of materials that are being installed as well. If the safe working load for that mobile elevated working platform allows that, then yes, your risk assessment can include the raising of materials. But then you need to know the weight of the material. You need to know how much of the material is going to be put on, and are you going to be able to prevent the material from falling out of that platform, which means you might even have to have mesh guard all around this platform in order to protect any tools or materials from falling out. Again, these are special precautionary measures that might have to be taken. It's not just minimum compliance with the law. It's going to be legislated minimum compliance, as well as any safe working procedure that is incorporated from your risk assessment. Never operate a mobile elevated working platform if you have not been trained or have a license in order to operate that. You can be found guilty of manslaughter if somebody falls out of that and dies, and you were found not to have a license. So do not be bullied by any person to operate any type of mobile elevated working platform if you are not trained or have a license to do that. Remember, falls from heights can kill you. Every month around the world, employees are involved in injuries from falling. This could be short-term, long-term injuries, paralysis, yes, death. It only takes a few moments to plan and prepare for the work you're going to do. Don't let the rest of your life, even though it might be very short after a fall, be affected by a few seconds of being unsafe. Remember, a fall from height can kill you. So please take the time and ensure that you have got all the precautionary measures in place to protect you and your employees from any of these 4 working at heights areas. So as we mentioned, next week we are going to be looking at the electrical side, and then we're going to be wrapping up the month on the risk of water. So we'll hand it over back to you, Byron, if we have any questions or comments on what we've been discussing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We actually do have a question here. We have one a bit off topic, but has the prime course been suspended? He's asking, I have finished the first 2 modules and haven't been contacted regarding the next steps. My emails remain unanswered.
Thank you very much for that question. No, it has not been suspended. We do apologize for that delay. It was a bit of teething problems with getting our CPD accreditation from PRB, but we did have them, and all the modules just had to be re-looked at and redesigned, especially with the new templates of the certificates, so that we could include those PRB CPD points for you. So we don't want you to go and do all the modules and then not be allocated those CPD points. So I do know that a few have reached out to me. I'm sorry that we haven't replied as yet, but we will get back to you. So please don't give up on this. It is really a course that has been designed for you as plumbers. We apologize for the delay, but really the commitment from our side is 100% still there, and the value that you're going to be getting is still going to be worth it. Thank you very much for that question, Byron. We also can maybe just mention to all of our attendees, if you take a look on your screen, if you do have the availability to see this, on the left-hand side of the screen, you will notice that you can get in contact with us on safety@opsa.org. info@ohss.co.za, as well as personally, you can contact myself. That is my personal number on 071-875-2070. I know that some have tried to call, and sometimes I am busy in audits or training. So please, I do encourage you to WhatsApp me if possible. That will also then remind me that I do need to get back to you instead of getting a missed call. So if you are able to do even an SMS, telling me to please call you back, and I will definitely get back to you. That number again, 071-875-2070.
So we have the next question here. Which training would be applicable for us making use of a ladder? Would WAH training be correct?
Definitely, working at heights training must include all 4 working at heights areas, which includes working on a ladder. I would encourage you to use a unit standard, which is 22995. So that is 22555 unit standard. That is probably one of the best unit standards for working at heights. Now, when it comes to making use of working on a ladder, you can also incorporate in-house training for the use of a ladder. So use your safe working procedure as well as your risk assessment to go over with your team, and you can make out a competency certificate for them stating that they have been trained in-house, as well as with the 22995 unit standard, which the training provider will then help you with. I do know that the 120362 unit standard, which is something that was based off of working at heights, actually stated that they were training you on ladders, but this is incorrect. That is more about harness awareness, how to use a harness and how to make use of the harness when working at heights, but it doesn't apply specifically to fall protection. And so we encourage you to please try and make use of the right unit standard. Don't be bullied by training providers who are going to give you the wrong training. I do see that other question again from an anonymous attendee. If employees do not work on scaffolding, etc., and just on ladders, no more than 2 meters, which training would be then correct. Again, it depends on the type of work that is being performed. So if you are going to be performing work on a ladder and it's no more than 2 meters, if your client states that it is not specifically working at heights, you can then just do ladder awareness. Now, some training providers have given you an actual ladder training course that you can go on. This is not like a legislated requirement. You can do in-house training on ladders, but as soon as you are working at heights, then you must have a working at heights certificate. So again, this would be based off your risk assessment as well as what your client requests from you. They are allowed to go over and above the law. Please remember that. What we are talking about is minimum compliance. So your client can state that they do still require additional working at heights training for working on a ladder. I think that's all the time that we have for this morning, Byron. Again, if you want to contact me directly, please use that number or the email. And Charles, we will definitely get back to you. Thank you for that question. And we appreciate your persistence with the Prime course. In fact, we hope all of our plumbers take advantage of that.